Good evening. This being Monday, December the 4th, 2017, the City Council has set this evening as the Truth in Taxation public hearing and input meeting. Ask the City Administrator to note the roll call of all members of the Council present, as well as the City Administrator, Deputy Administrator, the other members of the staff that are here to assist with information with regard to the 2018 budget and levy, and we'll follow the agenda there and ask the City Administrator if you would begin with the presentation and then move to council questions and public input and questions. City Administrator.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council and public. I think before I go through my formal presentation, I would just like to point out for the public's input more than any is that oftentimes in the past we have people here and they have questions about their valuation, that is the property valuation that the county assessor puts on it. And really the purpose of this meeting is a truth in taxation hearing, so it's to talk about the city's budget and the amount of property tax levy that the city is proposing for taxes payable in 2018. If anybody has a specific question about their property being valued too high because the county assessors increased it 20% or 40% or something, this really would not be the meeting to have that conversation. So I just wanted to make that statement because oftentimes we'll have people here that have questions about that, and that's really not what the purpose of this meeting. Having said that, everybody's more than welcome to stay here and hear the presentation on the budget. So I'd just like to point out then that what I've put together with the assistance of our staff is the packet of information materials, and everybody has a copy of that. And this really is some basic information, just provide some general information about the proposed 2018 budget. It identifies the proposed expenses, the proposed revenues that we have in major general categories. It also talks a little bit about the recent history of local government aid payments that are made to the City of International Falls by the state of Minnesota. And actually the City of International Falls is extremely dependent on those local government aid payments, and we feel very fortunate to receive the amount of state we do because some communities receive none, and we actually receive over $4 million a year as the City of International Falls. And then there's also a lot of information about the recent history of our property tax levy, so you can kind of see what the trends have been over the recent past, roughly 10 or 12 years. So one of the things I think that is important to highlight is that when the City Council was working with staff to develop the 2018 budget, I think there was a consensus on the part of the City Council that really one of the budget priorities is to upgrade and improve our public infrastructure. Public infrastructure will include the streets and to some extent the storm sewer, sanitary water mains that we have in the city. That's been a priority of the city in drafting this budget for 2018. As part of that work, then the city had made, or the City Council, working as a Budget and Finance Committee, had recommended as much as $52,500 in cuts to various agencies that we've provided funding to in the past. And so the idea was by making some of those reductions to some of these other agencies, it would free up monies for doing some budget. I also want to point out that the police department budget has increased somewhat for 2018 because the council has approved moving forward to hire one additional patrol officer. The impact of having that additional patrol officer is to free up another patrol officer that can work with the Paul Bunyan Drug Task Force, and the city's adopted a multi-jurisdictional agreement for 2018. Bunyan Drug Task Force, and the Drug Task Force works with other counties and cities in a primarily the north central part of the state to try and drugs and other substances in the area of responsibility. So the combination of those two things has really been a focus and has led to some extent to increased costs in the 2018 budget. I made the notation that we cut over $660,000 by we, meaning the department heads worked jointly with the city council to make $660,000 in cuts that the various departments had originally requested in the 2018 budget. And to just focus on some specifics, on the second page of my handout, I've got highlights here, and you can see in number 1 that the local government aid, and LGA is how that's abbreviated, and it's a government acronym for local government aid, actually increased between 2017 and 2018 by about 2.31%, or $93,014. And so that's a action on the part of the state legislature to try and increase LGA that was reduced significantly back in, I believe it was 2002, 2003, and it still hasn't been increased to the levels that it was back in 2002. So, nonetheless, the city is receiving $93,014 more in 2018 than we did in 2017. 2012 through 2014, we had 0% increases in our property tax levy. You can see that that inched up in 2015 by 2%, 2016 by 4%, 2017 by 5%, and what's being proposed for the 2018 budget is a 9% increase in our levy. The total levy would be up to $2,560,976. Effective that 9% increase, about $211,000 in new money. I think it's very important that the public know and that the City Council remember that the City of International Falls is debt-free. I think that's very unusual for public jurisdictions to be free of any. Falls is debt-free because we've tried to proceed with paying for our improvements on a pay-as-you-go basis. Levy, or we use existing revenues to pay for what we need to. We're currently negotiating 3 union contracts, and each of the existing contracts expire in December 31st of this year. Not concluded any of those 3 contracts, so we don't know what the labor costs are going to be for 2018, 2019, or 2020 if we decide to proceed with a 3-year contract. So that's notation. Before the meeting, we had just a general discussion about what was happening with the taxes in 2018, and I wanted to point out here, and you see it in number 9 of my memo, is that the county assessor has increased property valuations, and that's only property valuations for residential properties that have structures on them. So if it's a vacant lot, but it's zoned or residential, there wouldn't be any increase. But if there's any kind of a residential structure on an existing lot of record, properties that are valued currently by $75,000 or more, the county assessor increased those valuations by 5% for taxes payable in 2018. And they base that increase, which they're required to do by state law, based on the actual sales data. So they saw sufficient sales in the city of International Falls that showed that the actual sales on properties were inching up by roughly 5%. So they made an increase in the property values of everybody's property that's valued $75,000 or more for residential uses by 5%. What that means to you as a taxpayer is that by having a higher property value, if all the jurisdictions were even trying to generate the same amount of money, you're going to pay more in taxes in 18 than you did in 17 just because the county's valuing your property by 5% more. Another important point is that the property tax statements that we all received here in November from the county auditor's office does not reflect the tax increase that we're going to see as a result of the public approval of the referendum for the school district. The auditor's office had actually prepared all the property tax statements that we received prior to the election on November 7th. So the increase that was approved at Bronco Arena and for the operating levy referendum is not going to be reflected in your property tax statement. So, so your actual taxes are probably going to be higher than what you see on your property tax statement because that referendum. In fact, I talked to the county auditor's office today and called them to just verify that information, and they said that to get that information to the county auditor until the end of this month. We don't know what that. I wanted to make sure that that point was clear. I will talk a little bit about what the impact is on that. I've got some information later on. So I don't know that I want to go through any of the other points I've included in my memo. I think they're all self-explanatory, but I wanted to go through some of those initial ones just so that you are aware of the general parameters of what went into our budget. I would make the point that the preliminary levy for taxes that the City Council approved at our September 25th meeting was set at $2,560,976, and that the levy may be reduced, but it cannot be increased by state law. And so this budget that we've prepared for this evening's meeting has no changes since the preliminary levy was approved in September of this year. Moving on, I've included in the packet a copy of the draft resolution that we'd be asking the City Council to take. Again, this resolution lays out some facts, but it would be approving the final tax levy for taxes collectible in 2018, and it would be approving the final 2018 budget. We're asking that the City Council act on this at the next meeting, December 18th, to allow the public some time to review our budget and for the Council to consider if you wanted to make any changes. So we're not asking that you adopt this resolution tonight, but it will be on the agenda for the December 18th meeting for you to act on. Required by law to have this over to the county auditor's office no later than December. The attachment to the resolution is Exhibit A, and it shows the budget and the levy for 2018. This is a little bit more detailed information, but it's in a similar format to what we've used in past years. It identifies the fund that the city has, the general government fund or the general fund, and that's principally where the property taxes are attributable to, but there's also other funds that get some property taxes. And so this particular exhibit lays out where monies are proposed to go and where there's transfers between funds for 2018. Bottom of the page, I would just highlight that there's a column on the left towards the middle of the page that says appropriations. Total appropriations for 2018 include music, art, the senior center, which we have a contract to provide, Bronco Foundation, and then the Citizens for Bacchus. The total for those particular appropriation partnership agencies is $85,500. Listed some other agencies that we provide funding for. The total for those is listed under other, and it's $415,196 in total dollars. Right, and the bottom of the page, you can see the levy history going from 2012 all the way through what's proposed for 2018. Again, I talked about the dollar amount for 2018. You can see the actual dollar increase between 2017 and 2018's property tax levy is $211,457 in new money for 2018. That is the dollar amount that we generate with a 9% levy increase. Below that, you can see the history between 2014 and 2018 with local government aid, and you can see that the increase, as I 2017 and 2018, $93,014. Our total local government aid for 2018 is certified by the state to be $4,124,000, and $124,091, and that's, you know, just under double what we are generating in our own property tax levy. To put that into what it means for the community is that if we didn't receive any local government aid assistance from the state of Minnesota, we have to generate an additional $4 million to pay for the same level of services that we provide. A factor and contributor to our revenues for providing services to the public in International Falls. Going on to the next page, you can see the 2018 budgeted revenues, and we've identified those revenues in a pie chart, so you can see what the dollar amounts are for instance, local government aid, property tax levy, the Voyageurs National Park lease revenue that we receive from the federal government, and the percentage terms that constitute as part of our total revenues. So we've included that for public information. The largest single component is the local government aid of 28% of our total revenues. The second highest total revenues are generated in the water and sewer rates that we charge in the water and sewer fund. And that constitutes just over $4 million or 27% of our total revenues. Next page identifies the 2018 budgeted expenditures. You can see that those are laid out into major categories. Again, general government constitutes about 40% of our total budgeted expenditures. Ambulance department, which generates monies from ambulance fees charged to users of the service, about 11%. Water and sewer is about 22% of our total expenditures. Voyageurs National Park, we have some the EDA bonds off through the lease revenues that we have, and we also have operational expenses to maintain the. The rest of them are laid out there in percentage terms and real dollar terms in that pie chart. Next page is just a table that identifies the property tax levies going all the way back to 2009 through proposed 2018. And it actually shows the actual local government aid that was certified, and then the dollar increases or decreases. One point I would make regarding this table is you can see in 2010 that there was a $96,751 decrease in local government aid, and there was 4 occasions, and I have another graph somewhere else in this material, where the state of Minnesota told us we were going to get a certain amount of local government aid, and then due to state budget shortfalls, they cut our allocation, and over the total of 4 years, that amount was just over $1 million. So, and that's very difficult for the city to address because we've already anticipated as part of our budget preparation, but not actually received them. So that table just shows what the history again is in dollar amounts for levies and local government aid. Got another one that shows the changes, and I guess it's actually this chart. You can see back in 2003, you see a difference of plus or minus. You can see that there was 4 occasions where in 2003, 2008, 2009, and 2010, the state government unallocated local government aid that we were supposed to receive, and that total was about $1,105,150 that we were supposed to receive and didn't actually receive because of state budget problems. So we are dependent on our state aid, and we are dependent on the fiscal health of the state government as a local government. The table again identifies that the LGA increase, or the levy increase, was about $211,000, and the total increased revenues that we received from LGA and property tax levy are $304,471. You see a couple of bar charts following. Those bar graphs show just the actual dollar amounts, and you can kind of see what the trends are by looking at these bar graphs. So between 2006 and 2018, you can see the local government aid trends. It's been relatively flat throughout those years. The next page is a bar graph that shows the combined real dollar amounts and what the graph shows for LGA payments and property tax levies, and you can see the trends between 2010 and 2018. That includes what's proposed for 2018. Those trends. And the next couple pages just show the history of what we've provided to some of our partnership agencies and identify some of the cuts that were made by or recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee between 2017 and 2018 by organization. Follow-up page shows percentage increases by year in some of the partnership agency funding. And attached at the end of the packet of materials is miscellaneous background information. We want to draw your attention to what's included in here is some text from the League of Minnesota Cities, the Department of Revenue that has some summary data regarding levies and LGA for cities, counties, school districts, statewide, so it has some aggregate information if you're interested in that. I actually included something from an email I received today from the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and there was an article in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune on November 26th, and it talks about the cities replacing aging water sewer pipes. I talked a little bit as part of my preliminary comments about how important it was to the City Council to upgrade our streets, water systems, and sewer systems. The legislature approved $122 million in new monies for water projects last year, but it says here, and this is no pun, but it was just a drop in the bucket of more than $11 billion that will be needed over 20 years from now. Appropriated $122 million in identified estimate of $11 billion in infrastructure that needs to be funded. And that our city council is taken seriously in its budget and needs to address in the future. And the last piece is just some information that explains information about why your property taxes change from year to year. And just suffice it to say that there's a lot of different moving targets that all impact what you have to pay in property taxes and how those property taxes are calculated. And this listing identifies some of the frequently asked questions and what the answers to those questions are. So, my final concluding comments would just be related to the sheet that shows the preliminary city levy changes for calendar year 2018. So it's the first page after the miscellaneous background information. What Emma and I have tried to do is we put together some information from the Department of Revenue. And the Department of Revenue put information together based on all the information they get from cities, counties, and school districts on their preliminary levies, and their, what's the dollar changes in those. And so I've selectively picked some cities that are up in this area just so that we can compare what we've been doing with our levy relative to other communities. And by communities, I mean cities, counties, and school districts. And so I just want to point out, in the first section, you can see the jurisdiction. So for all cities in 2017, dollar change in levies was $131 million and change. For 2018, that total dollar change for all cities in the state went up $151 million. That equates in percentage terms to a 6.2% aggregate increase for 2017. And this is the preliminary proposed levies in 2017. The preliminary proposed levies for 2018 statewide are going up 6.8%. International Falls, we put in italics in bold. In 2017, we only increased our levy 5%. Proposed for 2018 is 9%. You can see that the city of Hermantown was 17.8% in 2017, and 10.5% in 2018. Another higher one, Tower, was at 9.9% in 2017. They're at 10.2%. 14.2% in 2017. They're only 2.3% in 2018. So there's a number of different factors that go into calculating how councils or governing bodies calculate their levy increases. The center part references counties, and I've included Itasca, Koochiching, Lake of the Woods, and St. Louis counties. You can see the differences in 2017 and 2018 proposed levies, and I actually put the dollar amounts for 2018 for those particular counties. And then at the bottom, I just want to point out school districts. And you can see that some select school districts were included here. And I put International Falls in here, District 361. One of the interesting things I would point out, I guess, for all school districts is that in 17, all school districts' fundings, at least as their preliminary levies were certified to the state, went up 72 million, almost 73 million. In 2018, that number's tripled to $210 million. What I think is important, and the reason why I wanted to look at this, is that for International Falls, we had talked a little bit at the beginning that the school district, I had said that in your property tax statements that you received, not include the proposed levy increase that was approved in the levy referendum that we had on November 7th. This number does include that levy, the impact of that levy referendum on the falls. So what that means is, and I can't tell you what it is for specific properties, but they did increase that levy referenda in here. So for International Falls Public School District in 2017, they had their preliminary levy was a reduction over what they had in 2016 of 5.2%. With the proposed levy that they have for their general operating expenses and the operating levy referendum and the improvements to the Bronco Arena, that increase in percentage terms for 2018 is 43. The best information that we had, and again, it's big picture stuff. It doesn't mean my property or your property might look like for a tax increase, because these other issues are also part of the tax calculation. With all that background information, Mayor, I appreciate your indulgence in the background information that I could provide, and so I'd be available to answer any questions. I do want to commend and thank our finance department staff. I mean, we have a new finance officer this year, Brad Edisted. Betty's been a trooper and been our rock for probably 20 years now in the administration department, and of course Emma's contributed significantly and as you know, she's moved up to the administration support specialist position, and she helped me in putting together most of this documentation. So I want to thank each and
all right, questions from the City Council. First, thank you, Ken. Thank you to Eddie, to Brad, and to Emma for your help with all of this information. It's very, very enlightening to have all this data put together, and very, very nicely done. Questions on the part of the City Council of the City Administrator with regard to information that he has provided?
Well, it was scant, is my objection. Very thorough. Thank you. It's I'd say, little manual on understanding city taxes. Thank you.
I could offer a comment. One of the other pieces of information I typically like to provide is I like to just have some benchmarks showing what the impacts of this budget would be on a home valued at $50,000 or $75,000, $100,000, $150,000, etc. We have not included that information this year, partly because of time constraints and things, but also because of I think it would be misleading to the public to show that, knowing that we had this referendum and that really the tax impacts are going to be, your property taxes are going to be different than anything we would show because of that. So we did
Very nice job.
Please. Thank you. Other questions? We will move to the public. I assume some of you came here with questions with regard to the city budget, or with regard to the taxes, or the information that you might have received from the county. So if you have questions, be glad to try to respond to them. You just
Congratulations.
thank you. Now you purchased a home on Riverview Boulevard.
Yeah. What roads it affects and tax money that affects the roads in this town.
The administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll leave the council to answer that question because I know that you're very well versed on it. But just for the record, I just asked the gentleman for his name and address just so we can have that.
Could you give your name and address for the...
Roger Jackson.
So with regard to what do we plan to do on streets? Excuse me?
I'm ready to answer behind you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've just finished a study of the streets of International Falls by an engineering firm. And they have a ranking system where they went through every block in the city, 31 miles, 34 miles, whatever the number of street miles that we have. And they ranked every block, and some of them, they ranked them from a 1 to a 6. So if they were in great shape, they got a high number. If they were in poor shape, they got a low number. And they came up with the estimated need to fix the streets of International Falls at over $7 million. We spend somewhere around $150,000 to $200,000 a year trying to repair the streets, make improvements to them. So we're not getting anywhere close to it. We've got to figure out some other way to generate more dollars. So what happens most generally, we did not do any surfacing of city streets in 2017. We had one project and that went from 3rd Avenue to 6th Avenue. I think it was 3 blocks along the VFW building, 15th Street, and that was a state aid. We were able to secure state aid for that, and so we did do some bituminous surfacing there. We did a couple of patch jobs here and there, but no real street improvements. And so the council works with the department, our public works department, and tries to determine which streets should we be working on. What we don't want to do is fix a street and then dig it up the next year to fix the water and sewer. So we got to make sure that any street that's improved, that we have everything is good underneath, that the water, sewer, and storm sewer are all in good shape. And so we look at the various blocks. In 2018, the plan right now is to do a section of 9th Avenue from 11th Street to 17th Street. So I think that's about 4.5 blocks, something of that nature. So that will be overlaid in 2018. And then we're looking to do Crescent Drive, which is the road that goes out alongside Highway 53 from Washkeys out to the dead end. That was a state highway, and that has not been improved in, I want to say 20 to 25 years. And so the city is looking to improve that and overlay that area. Right now, we don't have plans to do any other street improvements, Riverview, Shorewood, or anywhere else right now. So let me turn to Councilor Droba to give his thoughts and then come back to you.
Storm drains were fixed, that'll help.
Everything that the mayor has said is conversations that we've been going through over the past 2 years. One of the other things that came up, this being a focus for us in this budget year, was to get the infrastructure fixed and the roads and such. However, we realized once we got that information from the engineering firm that we are so far behind the power curve, we are not going to be able to do anything with the funds that we have. So it actually had opened up a conversation of a bond so that we could get those streets fixed in the near future and be able to get the most for our money by getting a large portion of the city done that is in those ones and twos that were identified through the study. One of the better term, crappy parts of the whole thing is if we are going to work on some of the parts of the city right now, it's not going to be those ones and twos because we don't have the money to put into that. It's going to be a better option for the city to fix the threes and fours, to get those, to maintain those, to keep those up to standard before they disintegrate to the point where we have to do a complete remodel on them or a complete redo on it. So we are in conversation right now on how we're going to get this bond moving forward in the near future so that we can do the most, get the most for our money by what was the word that we used? To mobilization to get crews up here to do street by street to get the most for our money in the near future. And I don't know what the time frame was going to be on the bond to be able to do those street projects, but that has been one of the major pieces of our last budget session. Can you?
But one thing with that too is, you know, I talked about the engineering study on the streets. I think we're also doing the engineering study on the water and sewer underneath the streets, because what the engineers told us, you ought to look at what's underneath there, because you might have a 3 or 4 that you could upgrade, but because of the water and sewer, they're saying you probably don't want to do that right now because you're going to end up tearing it back up again to do the water and sewer. So we're waiting for that study to be complete too. So.
And we're not the only city coping with this. From the information that the city administrator provided supports that. Duluth
is in the same boat, yes.
Is there a way to find out?
As far as what yes,
absolutely.
we do have that. We do have the numbers, and we're just waiting, as Councillor Briggs pointed out. We're waiting for the water and sewer, and then we're going to have we'll have a public meeting or have a discussion here with regard to what are the street numbers and what do we need to do to go forward. And as Councillor Droba pointed out, we probably have maybe 3 options. One, we can continue to try to do fix-ups every year with the small amount of money that we have by increasing the city budget. So we can try to put a little more money aside, see if we can't cut out some other items in the budget to try to get $300,000 or $400,000 so you can do a good-sized project. But knowing that we need to do probably need to do several $1 million over the next few years, we could do a bond issue, and that would have to go to the voters in November of 2018. So we could put together a plan as to how much money should we take and try to raise by bonds. Go out and sell bonds and pay them off over a period of a number of years. That would mean that everyone in International Falls would be assessed a certain amount of money for those street improvements. The other option that we have talked about is what Duluth is in the process right now, and that would be to put on a sales tax. The sales tax would be exactly the same as the state sales tax. It would not be on medicine, it would not be on clothing, it would not be on groceries. But if you go out to have dinner, there would be a sales tax on that. So we could possibly levy a sales tax. Everyone who decides to come to International Falls and eat in one of our restaurants would pay that. So folks who live in Jameson Addition, Rainier, Island View, out here in Meadowview, if they come to town, they would end up paying some of that tax, and it would contribute towards fixing up the streets. That takes a two-step process. First of all, the City Council has to approve it, then the citizens have to approve it, and then the state legislature has to approve it. So if we were to bring that to the citizens in November of 2018, we could get approval by the citizens, then we have to go to the legislature in the 2019 session and ask their approval. There are right now 25 cities in rural Minnesota that have sales taxes. And that includes Hibbing, Bemidji, Virginia. Many, many cities have got a sales tax. We're one of the few that presently doesn't have. So that's an option that we are looking at, and we'll probably conclude sometime in February or March which way we're going to go as a possible way of funding street improvements, more street implements.
And sharing the burden.
And sharing the burden.
Beyond just the property tax.
So if someone comes here in the summertime and rents a motel room, they would pay a sales tax on that. Please.
And just to add one more thing, one of the, if you came back last December, just shortly before you came back, there was a survey that was put around Coochin County, International Falls included, and one of the questions that we had asked as a city through that survey is, would you be willing to pay more for street improvement? And the overwhelming majority of residents of International Falls did say yes. So in the event that we did go buy a bond, it does sound like the citizens of International Falls would be open to add their bonding money to that. So this is definitely something that was near and dear to my heart through this whole process this year, and I was dismayed that we were not able to do more this year, but when we saw how big the scope was, we realized that we couldn't really get a hands on it with the amount of money that we had this year, and we needed to do something bigger to make sure that we could address the infrastructure issues that we have in the near future.
Have you done engineering?
We haven't received the final report. We did get one piece of information with regard to the water, and didn't realize it myself until we were told by the engineering firm. We have 27 blocks of the city that have only a 4-inch water line, and we need to replace that 27 blocks with at least a 6 or an 8-inch line. If you hook onto a fire hydrant with a 4-inch water hose, you're going to pull everything you can out of that line. And so we need larger water lines. And so before we fix up those 27 blocks, we need to replace the water line in that area for sure. And that's some of the older area right behind City Hall here. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th streets, those are the areas that have those small water lines in them. But we should have that report, I believe, sometime this month from the engineer on the water and sewer and storm sewer.
What about taxing each car when you go to Canada and stuff?
Certainly if they're purchasing something in town here, they would pay sales tax, and that would help to fix the streets. We have a number of categories of how you fix streets in town. One is you just do blocks within city residential areas. We also have county state aid streets, and the county helps us to fix up streets. And I would give you an example of a county state aid street would be Keenan Drive from Highway 71 going past the Care Center and the Essentia. That's a county state aid street. 11th Street is a county state aid street, and the county has helped us to do some bituminous surfacing there. And then we have state aid streets, and those are those that connect two highways. And so we have a number of streets that are eligible. 6th Street would be a state aid street because it connects Highway 53 with Highway 71. So we have a number of those that are state aid streets also. So there's 3 categories of street that we can try to secure funds for, and we are working on that every year. Further questions?
Just a comment. I'm Robert Biden, live on Shorewood Drive. My questions have been answered already. I'll tell you the reason why. Not just a 17% increase in the taxes. Back on my taxes, last 9 years, I would have gotten back 10, but I have those records. So I'm looking at you, Mayor, about it. Yep. That's my concern, is where I don't want enforcement. We had, I believe, 10 full-time city policemen. Manpower, woman, that affected it. ELS, and that looks like that's self-sufficient.
May I say something here? Mr. Mayor? It's, you know, when you look at the burden of taxes, it also depends upon how other entities in our tax pie here are taxed. And I will tell you that when, during the Paulini administration they changed the net tax capacity rate in large industry. So Boise got a 50% tax cut on that alone. Not to mention significant reductions in assessed value. So back in the late 90s, Boise was paying $3 million a year just on the mill. Today it's less than $700,000. That decrease in revenue is shifted to everybody else. So you can't just look at city government, you have to look at the whole pie.
Councilor Briggs.
You know, you mentioned it went from 600 something to 1,500? One thing you need...
1263 city share.
Okay. You need to, like what Ken said earlier, you need to look at what happened to the value, what does the county evaluate your resident at? You know, 10 years ago, was it valued at 100,000? Now it's valued at 200,000? Because...
Brian, it hasn't gone up 90% in value. That's in the city.
But our budget has not gone up 90%.
But in those 10 years, I'll tell you...
I'm talking as a citizen.
Yeah,
sure. That's why I'm here. Yeah. You've answered a lot of my questions over.
Yeah.
But that shift was not discussed. And as your property tax contribution is in part impacted by the values of all the assessed values and the way they're taxed on all the other property in the city. One of the big players is Boise. And they have in the past contributed far more to our tax base than they do now. And that loss of revenue is shifting to residences. And by the way, that tax bill they passed in the late 90s hurt middle income and low income low-income homeowners. And I think just about everybody in I Falls is in one of those two classes.
That was a state legislature,
Right,
and the governor did that.
But what the state legislature does, I mean, I'd like to think that our budget went up 90%, but it didn't in the city.
Mr. Mayor, I think we kind of went off base of where Mr. Byman's question was. How many officers do we have now comparatively to 10 years ago? Because that was one of the questions that he had. And what, I mean...
11, I think, right now. 11?
We used to have 13 paid officers. At some point, prior to my coming with the city about 4 years ago, it was cut to 11 paid officers. And this particular budget is increasing it from 11 to 12 paid officers. So we are adding one patrol officer. And again, primarily to assign somebody to work with the... We're still one less police officer than we were roughly 10 years ago.
And I certainly don't want to pick on just law enforcement. I'm looking at every department, and I certainly don't have
personnel. And I would tell you that we used to have a street commissioner and a water and sewer commissioner. You probably remember Leroy Schneider and Lee Stone and those years. We did away with the water and sewer commissioner position when I'm trying to think of who retired
Johnson,
here.
Ralph?
No, it wasn't.
Christie.
Ralph Christie retired. We did not replace the position, and we had Ted Brokaw take over both water and sewer and streets. And so we use one of the hourly employees as a lead person now, and so, but we only have one commissioner, so we did away with one, trying to reduce the amount of costs for in water and sewer areas. I'm trying to think if there's any other. I know this year the street department worked one person short all year. We are in the process of putting on someone. Is that going to happen this year or next year?
They're interviewing this week for a light equipment operator, yes.
So we are going to put one person back we've worked short all year. So we really are trying to watch personnel costs. You're correct on the ambulance and EMT areas. Those are by fees and have been self-sufficient to date. So we haven't had to levy any. The county has contributed to that in the past, but the county board notified us this year that they will not be contributing any monies towards the ambulance. And I want to say 10,000? They've been giving 10,000 each year, but that will not be the case. So,
yeah, and as we learned, we're not finding, as Councilor Droba said earlier, it isn't in our budget. There isn't 400,000 there that we're spending that we could save. Really, there isn't. You know.
Further questions, Bob?
Answer.
Oh, please. It's great to have these opportunities to talk about these. So, Roger or Bob, if you've got other questions or thoughts. Tricia, please.
I have just a couple just from the conversation. Again, just the reallocation, right? Less people, same budget, everybody's just...
I'm listening to some other people that have concerns also. So I'm also here to tell you folks that there are some citizens that are upset, and we got a small crew here today. I looked at their buildings and I'm going, tax for it here. Councilman dropping in and saying, what can we do to help your businesses make it? Downtown businesses and taxes are high downtown. So I'm concerned about our city.
The biggest, I pay a lot in taxes, so I've been up there a number of times to understand it. And the biggest thing that people need to understand is that the valuation of your house goes up, your taxes are going to go up considerably, you know. They've just gone through the whole city, because for a long time they never got to half the city to increase valuations or do anything. So that's why a lot of people are probably getting hit hard now, is because the county has finally got out and hit every household and reevaluated them, and I would assume most of them went up, you know, because I share your concern. My taxes are considerably higher than yours, and in those 10 years, mine more than doubled in that same 10-year period like yours did. So.
Further.
A couple quick ones. So on number 8, where you were saying Ken's highlights there about the 3 union contracts, what are the 3 unions in the city? Just for my own FYI, I'm assuming the
Police, fire, and our 49er union, which is basically public works and some staff, office staff.
We have the 11 presently police officers. They are represented by 1 union. We have 4 fire engineers who drive the fire truck. They are at the fire station, and then volunteers go immediately to the fire. But the 4 fire engineers, they are in another union. And then all of the public works, which would include the city garage, the water and sewer employees, and 2 of our administration employees are all members of the Operating Engineers Local 49.
Mayor. In addition to the 4 full-time firefighter engineers, we also have 6 full-time paramedics as part of that same union. So.
Well, 6 paramedics are also covered by that union contract. So there's 10 members there.
clarification. So the 10, I get the whole about the school and that tax study just happened in November and how does that play out? But and then I get the that effective in 2018. Okay, so that will come out. And then the same as I see about the water is you're still flushing that out, but there is an expected water rate.
Yes, yeah, the City Council has been studying this. We've been mandated by the state to change our water rates to reflect trying to get folks to use less water. It goes against our grain here because we want folks to use more water. I mean, we've got a water plant out there that could easily generate 2 million gallons a day. We're less than 1 million. And so we'd like to sell more water, and that would help to reduce the cost for everyone. But the state has come forth, the state legislature has come forth with a plan that you should have conservation rates. And so we don't have the final numbers, but it would probably, some folks will see virtually no increase, some of the lower users of water, and then it will increase. And I think probably the highest increase that we would see might be around 7%. Do you remember, City Administrator?
That sounds approximately correct, yes. That's about right.
So there could be an increase in water rates to some users. But until we get that finalized here in the next month or two, we're hoping to have that done by February.
That's a big deal in today's world.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's great.
Councilor Groba.
I just want to talk longer so Brian can't leave. No, I just wanted to say one more thing about the conservation rates on the water. One of the major problems that we had with the way our water structure was, which was great for everybody for a very long time, we had one easy rate that was easy to follow. The problem was we gave away essentially free 2,000 gallons at a base rate, and that's what they made us do away with, is a base rate. You can have a base rate, but then your number starts going up after that. So one of the things we tried to do is to get the people that were using the least amount of water not to have their rates go up too terribly much, because that's going to be your obviously your low impact houses, your single family, or not even single family, husband and wife's retired, and single dwelling homes. So we wanted to try to keep that as low as we possibly could, but any way we changed the rate, it affected somebody negatively. So we wanted to try to keep it as best we possibly could, so most people weren't going to be affected, but it was seriously probably one of the hardest couple meetings we've ever had, because somebody was going to be dramatically increased by doing any change we had. And we looked at rate structure after rate structure to try to get it to be as palatable as we could.
Really hamstrung by the conservation law rule. We were stuck with this, because my inclination was to give the people with families a break if we could have, the people that have to wash diapers and have teenagers taking long showers and that kind of thing. They pay huge water bills now.
Further thoughts or questions? Further, Tricia, from you? No. Thank you. Bob or Roger? Or thoughts? Ideas? Certainly open to...
Just want to say your main street looks great.
Sure does.
Thank you.
Especially with that Christmas tree down on the end all lit up.
Yeah.
The street department did a great job of, yes, I think it looked very festive for the parade, and thank you to the chamber for putting together a great Christmas and Thanksgiving weekend event there. Other questions? Any other input that the council can receive this evening? Again, the council will be adopting the resolution at the December 18 meeting to set the budget and the levy. So if you have other questions or concerns in the meantime, please come and see the administrator or one of us on the council. If there's nothing further to come before the council at this public hearing, I would consider us adjourned.